Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. It is Sunday evening, the 13th of January 2019. And tonight's topic, Bitcoin ETF, gold and silver in deflationary times. It is Sunday evening speculation with Smaulgld. Just looking at the comments in the pre-show, Carl Joseph DeMarco is home in the snow. There's some snow in DC, if you can believe it. He's having a delightful evening with his Smaulgld hot cider in his mug, his Smaulgld mug. And Anne is further south, and she's saying no snow there, 3 hours south. So it looks like Washington, D.C. having a rare snowstorm. 7 inches. All right. Well, let's take a look at our markets before we get into the speculation about a Bitcoin ETF. And will it get approved, or will many of them get approved, and what might that mean for Bitcoin, not just in terms of price, but as a functioning currency? Also, we're going to ask you guys what happens to gold and silver in deflationary times. So think that one through before we get to that later in the podcast. Let's take a look right now. Gold trading now at $12.88, that's up $1.20 since the last close on Friday, and silver's right now at $15.57. So really no change there. Platinum's up $1 to $8.09. Palladium still outpacing gold, is at $12.98. That's up $10 from the gold price, but down $5 on the evening. As I mentioned, the futures going into tomorrow down a little bit, but this can all change. Right now, the Dow futures reflect a 0.3% decrease at the open. S&P futures about the same thing, and NASDAQ futures about the same thing. So we're not looking at a big up open or a big down open on the Dow. And again, not much happening over the weekend news-wise. The shutdown continues. This is the longest shutdown now in American history. However, it's not a full-on shutdown. It's only 25%. I think it's 60,000 or 600,000. I don't remember the number, but there's a decent number of U.S. citizens that are not receiving paychecks that work for the federal government. And federal employees generally have it good because they are not subject to strikes. They're not subject generally to mass layoffs, pay cuts, and they do get a pension. So I would imagine if you are a federal employee and you have that real steady job, that you should be able to have some type of cushion to sit out not getting a paycheck for a couple of weeks, especially since your creditors should realize, if you don't have any money saved, that you're good for it because the money will flow once the government gets reopened. Now, it does beg the question, when will the government be reopened? And if you think about it, both sides are ridiculous because they're really keeping the government shut over $5 billion, which is ludicrous when you think about how much money the federal government spends on both sides. And of course, both sides are hoping that people will say, well, President Trump, why are you keeping the government closed to over $5 billion? And his response to that is, I'm doing it for national security, humanitarian crisis, etc. And then Trump supporters are going to ask the Democrats, why are you keeping the government closed over $5 billion? And they're going to say, we don't like Donald Trump, and we don't think that a wall for $5 billion is worth the money, because we are budget hawks and we don't like to spend $5 billion needlessly. Well, that argument really isn't going to fly, because the next question is, well, you spend $5 billion, $10 billion, $20 billion on other stuff that doesn't make much sense, so it can't be about the money. Well, then they're going to say, well, border security is not best served by a wall. Okay, how is border security best served, and how much money are you willing to spend on it? Not $1. Well, okay, well, that's not going to fly either. So I don't see this thing ending without some money being spent for some type of border security and some money being spent for some portion of some wall. I don't see the entire border getting built up with a wall, but I do see something happening And if it doesn't happen, what I suspect will happen is Trump will eventually declare the national emergency. He will send the military and whoever's going to do it to build the wall. Then it becomes a question, does he then agree to opening the government and doing a budget? He may or may not. And the reason for that is, if there is a Ninth Circuit, most likely, injunction against the wall being built, well, then he may say, okay, well, while we wait, you guys can fix this. I'm not going to sign anything you send to me unless you end this national emergency that I just declared and you fund the wall, which is already now in train, except that there's an injunction on it. So we're going to override the injunction and you're going to fund the wall. That's what I think is going to happen. Remember the other night I said that Trump would not declare a national emergency. All commentators were saying that he was going to declare a national emergency. I said that he wouldn't, that he would try to sit this one out as long as possible and try to win public support. And that's basically what he did the other night. And he got a gift. Not that his speech was the most compelling thing, but he got a gift in the Nancy and Chuck show, which was, by all accounts, a disaster. And then he also got help from Jim Acosta's own goal, where he's standing in front of a wall and saying, I don't see any problems. All right, well, let's get now into, let's see what we have tonight, because this is all speculation. We do this from time to time. I label it as speculation. Let's handle the yellow vests first. Now, the yellow vests in France, they've been threatening this bank run. And the problem with a bank run is when you announce it in advance, you give the banks an opportunity to say, okay, well, limit the ATMs, shut down the ATMs, make sure there's glitches in the ATMs, limit the amount of withdrawals, and you're really not going to be able to pull it off. So it's probably not a smart move to telegraph that you're going to do a bank run. Secondly, a bank run doesn't help you. You may think you're harming the banks, but you're not. What you're doing is you're ensuring that if everyone does it at once, that you may not get anything. And then when they shut down the bank, then you can't get at your money. Banks never lose in this kind of thing. The only time banks lose is if there is some type of alternative situation where you don't need the money in the bank. Like you're using silver as a medium of exchange and you've already prearranged that you're going to transact in silver or you're going to transact in Bitcoin or Litecoin. But just to say we're going to take all of our money out, the bank's going to say, no, you're not. That's not your money. You lent it to us, and now we're in possession of it, and you can't have it. So I'm not sure where that's going to go, but it does highlight the concept that I've been talking about of silver as dormant money, can come back, isn't used currently, and that's why it's not money, because it doesn't meet one of the key tests, which is as a medium of exchange, can be, isn't. But in a circumstance like this, if a group of people, large group of people, decided they would settle their accounts with the unit of count of silver, then it would be. Remember, silver, argent is the word for silver, money, and also, of course, they could use Bitcoin. They can buy Bitcoin, and they can use Bitcoin. They can use Litecoin. But I'm not sure that any of this is happening. And the yellow vests, I'm not even sure who's behind them. Of course, they always say these things are organic. They rarely are. Someone has to be at the head of it. Maybe not, but someone. I mean, for them to say they're going to do a bank run, someone had to come up with that idea, and they had to somehow dispense or disseminate that information. And I'm not sure they were relying on AP. And if they were relying on AP and Reuters to disseminate that information for them, someone had to contact them. Speaking of countries that do not have functioning currencies, Zimbabwe, we've all talked about Zimbabwe, and the issue with Zimbabwe has been their currency would just went in, there's the whole, you can go out and buy notes, 20 billion, 30 trillion Zimbabwe dollar notes for $1 or something like that as a collector's item. They haven't used their own currency since 2009, since they've had that inflation, and they've been using the dollar and a few other foreign currencies, and there's just not enough dollars in their country to handle their needs. So they're talking about coming out with a their own currency. Now, they say they're going to do it within a year. I don't know why it takes so long to come out with a currency, why it would take a year to issue a currency, but that's what they say they're going to do. But again, Zimbabwe is not considered a country that's well run on any level, having had that massive inflation, that historic inflation that they had in 2008, 2009 with the $100 billion Zimbabwe notes. All right, well, let's get into now the topic of the evening. We're going to talk about the Bitcoin situation, what's going on with that, and then we're going to talk about gold and silver in inflationary times. And we really don't have any good historic records about gold and silver in deflationary times. Everybody talks about gold and silver as an inflationary hedge, but it's possible it works in deflation. The last time we had serious deflation, we had a little deflation in the 50s, but not too much. We did have it after the Great Depression in the early 30s, but gold was also a fixed price by 1934. But gold did well during, lack of confidence does cause some issues. So we really don't have, and then of course when you had inflation during the classical gold standards of the late 19th century, the currency itself was gold, and the gold was backed by the currency or set by related to a unit of gold. So we don't really have, everyone just assumes that gold is an inflationary hedge, and in deflation everything's going to go down, and gold's going to go down with it. We're going to talk about that with relation to what we've never had before either, is this massive increase in asset prices. Remember, we've had asset inflation, not necessarily so much price inflation. The price inflation that we've had across the board has been big time in things that are government subsidized and or stimulated, like college education, housing prices, things where the government either directly or indirectly subsidizes the purchase of the asset. But things such as technology, which are not necessarily subsidized by the government, those prices have actually come down. And then you have a mix of moderate inflation, consumer price inflation. And again, I'm not talking about oil because there's a lot of government action there, but your foodstuffs. And, food prices have gone higher, but they haven't hyperinflated. Things that have hyperinflated have been stock prices, the FANGs, Unicorn, Tesla stocks, housing prices, college education. But that's more a function of government policy than market forces. Question becomes when government forces create massive amounts of debt and money printing, and they have to slam the brakes on, or the market slams the brakes on for it, and then you get this unwind, and because there's not really the economic productivity, there's not really the economic demand, and you get a deflationary price decrease. What happens then? Would it even happen? Would the central bank step back in and just print like mad to avoid it happening? But if it did happen and the governments didn't step in, couldn't step in, what would happen to gold and silver? So we're going to discuss that, or you guys are going to discuss that.
Uh-oh, we got a moron here.
Presenting the distinguished international news commentator and foreign correspondent,
Smaulgld. This has been an extraordinary week in world affairs.
No, I told Hillary Clinton that that's moronic.
All right, well, let's take a look first at these cryptocurrency stories, because a lot of strange things happening in the crypto stories. Now let's take a look first at this story, this new company, Bitwise. They are filing for an ETF, and there's been about a half a dozen, maybe even a dozen companies that have filed for Bitcoin ETFs. Now, the concept of a Bitcoin ETF is somewhat antithetical to the idea of Bitcoin, which is meant to be a peer-to-peer exchange. It's meant to be a currency. It's not meant to be locked up in as an asset or, quote, store of value in some custodial agreements where people can hold on to it. Now, we do have, as an analog, we have gold and silver ETFs. Now, that makes sense to me because gold and silver are commodities, are tangible items, and they do have independent value, meaning, as I've been saying, gold and silver aren't used as a medium of exchange, therefore they're not money. Doesn't mean they don't have value, it just means they don't necessarily have the monetary component as a medium of exchange as a currency. However, I can understand why you would stockpile gold and silver and put them in an ETF. You want the value, you don't want to hold it yourself. You'll pay JP Morgan or HSBC to be the custodian if you trust them, and they will store that gold and silver. Now, the reason that they're not approving a Bitcoin ETF isn't because of the problems I have with it, is that, well, why are you storing something? That would be like storing, if you think that Bitcoin is a currency, storing dollar bills. Why would you do that? You can store them yourself. You can hold on to them yourself. Well, the answer is that certain institutional investors, they can't just stockpile dollar bills in their garage, and they can't just get out a treasure wallet and hold on to Bitcoin for their clients. So they need something like this. Okay, well, that makes sense. But the issue is, what good is a Well, there you go. Happened to us again. We always get cut off most of the time on this show, at least once a time. But anyway, what I was saying is, if you have Bitcoin locked into an ETF, it goes against the whole concept of Bitcoin being a medium of exchange, because Bitcoin itself has no intrinsic value in the same way that gold or silver do, in that gold and silver, as we talk about all the time, have value even if you don't use them as a medium of exchange. That's a very important point. It's a point that most people miss. They think I'm cutting on gold and silver. They think I'm trashing it. What I'm saying is that gold and silver have value intrinsically. They have value for their properties, but they have value in the potential that you might be able to use it as a medium of exchange. But I believe the bulk of the value in gold and silver is not in its dormant insurance value, but in that it has their properties. No one is buying, if you think about palladium. Palladium's value isn't that, oh, one day I'm going to be able to take that 1 ounce US Eagle palladium coin and go spend it. No, the idea is that you're going to be able to take that 1 ounce palladium Eagle that you bought for $800 and go sell it for $1,900. So metals have value independent of even being monetary. And I don't think a lot of people have it stuck in their head. Gold is money, period. Silver is money, period. They can be used as medium of exchange, but their biggest value today is that they are metal, and they have uses, and they have a relative rarity. I don't mean it relative to each other, but I mean they're not in unlimited amounts, especially the precious metals. And so if you hold an ounce of palladium, platinum, gold, or silver, you have something. Now, if you have a Bitcoin, you don't have jack. The only reason Bitcoin is valuable, and it can be very valuable, if you're using it as it is intended purpose, sticking it in a vault or whatever they do, cold storage, and having it as a asset, so to speak, in a ETF doesn't make a lot of sense. However, that is what they want to do. Now, the question is, this SEC is not grappling with that issue. They could care less. They don't care what Bitcoin is. They don't care what gold is. All they care about is whether, for investor purposes, the person or the entity that is structuring the ETF can ensure, this is kind of funny, that the market that the asset is engaged in is not subject to manipulation, or if it is, that they can determine that. Well, that's kind of funny, because most people would think that the gold and silver markets are really subject to manipulation, and if that were the case, they never would have, if that was a concern, they never would have allowed a gold or silver ETF. The other is that there has to be some type of transparency into the market, okay, that they have market surveillance agreements, that they can get not respectable, but reliable pricing, which they can, because in gold and silver, it's not like, what's interesting in the crypto space is you got hundreds of exchanges, and they all have different pricing, so you have to create index. You may take Binance and Coinbase and a bunch of OKCoin, different exchanges, and use those as a benchmark. And there are those now, and I think that Van Eck put one together because they're trying to get an ETF approved too by the SEC. So they're trying to handle that concern. They're trying to handle the concern of manipulation and market surveillance. They hope to get that with this ErisX and this backed system where they can at least use U.S. exchanges to see what's going on. And then the other thing they're concerned about is the custodial arrangement. Now, I don't see why it's any harder to set up a custodial arrangement for Bitcoin as it would be for the gold ETF or the silver ETF. It's basically a custodial arrangement where you have a third party whose job is to hold on to the asset. And then I think in some cases it's not required, but some of the ETFs even have insurance. I'm not sure if GLD even has insurance, but they have a custodial arrangement where they have a vault, and that's where the asset or the situs of the asset is held in a vault somewhere in London or wherever they have the silver and the gold. Now, I'm not sure that any of this is going to happen, but a lot of people think that if this does happen, this will attract institutional investors. We'll see. A couple of other stories before we move on to the gold and silver and deflation. Bloomberg's talking about Bitcoin being cumbersome and slow for payments. Now, I think there's less of an issue with the Bitcoin being used is slow when it's used. I think it's more of an issue is it's not being used. And if it's being used more as, or considered to be used as something to tuck away and hold on to, well, then it's not going to be used as a currency. But then my question is, if it's not used as a currency and you're just going to stick it away, haven't you taken away its biggest value component? Remember the Smaulgld matrix that I had done, the value matrix on gold, silver, Bitcoin, and the US dollar. If you haven't watched that one, go back and watch that. I assigned value on a scale of 1 to 10 with each of the assets had. And I ranked gold very low as a medium of exchange because it's very difficult to nail gold into very small pieces in an economic fashion where you can get $5, $1 worth of gold, mostly because it's too expensive. So it's hard to have small amounts of gold to use as a medium of exchange, whereas silver performs that function a lot better. Dimes are good. They're worth about $1 or so. And, you can probably, they do make silver rounds that are even half the size of the dime. There's a bit of a premium on the mintage, but still you can do it. And of course you can have bigger silver coins as well. But we said in the Smaulgld matrix that Bitcoin, Litecoin, and other cryptocurrencies are superior in terms of not in their intrinsic value, but in their use, their ability to use as a medium of exchange for two reasons. One, they're easier to use and more people actually use them. And we said that the best in a non-crisis situation currency is the digital US dollar. Putting aside that the dollar itself has no intrinsic value, but that the dollar itself's biggest selling point is that it can be transferred with ease in a non-censored and a non-crisis situation. Now, we do know that there are places where you can't send the dollar. We know there's restrictions. If you send a certain amount of money, you have to fill out forms. There's certain restrictions if you run the dollar through MasterCard, PayPal, and so on. But in a normal flowing economy, the dollar in the SWIFT system, you can send dollars quick, fast, and easy, and people will accept them. So unlike Bitcoin and Litecoin, where virtually less than 1% of merchants, even far less than that, will accept a Bitcoin or Litecoin. Every merchant will accept some form of dollar. So I think the issue now with the Bitcoin is if you take away its currency, its medium of exchange, and you toss it into an ETF, I think it's different than putting gold in an ETF, because when you put gold in an ETF, it still has its properties that make it gold, meaning that it is shiny, it's yellow, has a certain density, and it can be used. If you put Bitcoin in an ETF, it loses all of its properties. It becomes dormant currency, not dormant money, but dormant currency. Remember I say gold and silver are dormant money because they don't have their currency part. Well, Bitcoin isn't money at all. Bitcoin is currency, but it's not currency if it's sitting in some vault, some cold storage in an ETF. That makes it dormant currency, and I think detracts from its value. Now, on the flip side here, you don't see this for gold and silver. You don't see gold and silver ATMs. There's like 15 gold ATMs in the world. There's 1 or 2 in the United States. There's one in Vegas. There's one in, I think, Atlantic City. There's a few in Dubai. Now, these things are becoming more popular, which this is the flip side to Bitcoin, Litecoin as a store of asset. This is Bitcoin, Litecoin as a functioning currency. You put your dollars in here and you convert your dollars into Bitcoin or Litecoin through an ATM, and now you have that. You're walking around with it in your wallet. It's like you have cash, and you can spend that. Most of the places that you buy the Bitcoin or Litecoin through an ATM, they're going to have, like convenience stores, the ability to pay in Bitcoin or Litecoin. Coin shops have these, and they will also accept Bitcoin and Litecoin. So that's the value. We no longer have, the issue used to be that money would have to go through a regression theory, which meant that you wanted the commodity for itself before you wanted to use it as a medium of exchange. So silver and gold were valuable before they were money. They became money because they realized that people would accept them because they were valuable. Whereas Bitcoin and Litecoin have no value. They arrive on the scene as a medium of exchange with no prior value. That's the difficulty in getting people to think they're worth anything. But then you just use the US dollar and say, well, that's the same thing. It arrives with no value if it's fiat. What gives these non-backed, non-intrinsic value currencies value is that they're used and they're a convenient medium of exchange, which overrides the gold and silver, which are not convenient medium of exchange, but yet still have intrinsic value. Now, a couple other things going on in this situation. Let's look at India. India says Indian banks to close accounts that involve cryptocurrencies. Now, Indian Reserve Bank, the Reserve Bank of India, is saying that they want to stop cryptocurrencies from being used. They don't think they're legitimate, and that's happening as well in Pakistan. Same person who reported that story reported this story saying the same thing, that if you use cryptocurrencies, the bank is not going to allow you to use its banking services. Now, the reason this is problematic and probably not a wise move on part of the banks is many Indians don't already have bank accounts. Now, if you think that one through, if you are a bank, one of the things they did in India is they had decided that in order to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, to get rid of some corruption and to get the unbanked into banks, was they were going to demonetize the 2 largest rupee notes in circulation at the time a couple of years ago, which meant on a Friday evening, Prime Minister Modi goes on TV and he says, those rupees you have aren't going to be worth anything. The only way they're going to be worth anything, you got to bring in 2 days, you got to bring them back to a bank and get new ones, or you have to deposit them into a bank account. And a lot of Indians says, I don't have a bank account. I said, no worries. Line up over there and you wait there 18 hours. And when you're done, we'll either give you new rupees. Oh, we're out of rupees. How about you take a bank account? We'll give you a card and has your rupees on it. You can use that and go on your way. And they just got themselves a new client. And they've also managed to recapitalize the banks. That was the real reason, I believe, that they pulled that stunt. And they probably did find some people who could not say where they got their cash from, and they either got arrested for fraud or they just traded it on the black market for a certain amount of rupee on the dollar or whatever it was, and they got paid some other way. Now, the Federal Reserve is talking about, it's interesting, they're saying not the inherent flaws in Bitcoin will make it worth less or less valuable, but that the supply of altcoins will decrease Bitcoin's value. That's an interesting argument. The one that's been around for the longest time is that while Bitcoin may be limited in supply, in that it only has 21 million as a cap, that there's no shortage of knockoffs, forks, and so on that you can create. That argument a Bitcoin maximalists wouldn't even listen to. They would just say Bitcoin is Bitcoin, everything else is a excrement coin. There's a bit of truth in that. There's also a bit of non-truth in that you can create similar situations. But I don't think that that is the issue. I think the issue that would undermine Bitcoin would not be a bunch of clones that wouldn't be as secure, wouldn't be as well used, would be different technologies, not the same technology with trying to create the same size infrastructure and ecosystem. But good try for the Federal Reserve to at least take a look at that issue. And Goldman Sachs, now this goes into the whole idea of these large banks coming into the system and trying to institutionalize it with ETFs and so on. Many people don't know, but Goldman Sachs has a big investment interest in a company called Smaulgld, and Smaulgld executed, and they also own Poloniex, a Bitcoin exchange, Litecoin exchange, Ethereum exchange in the United States, executed $24 billion in OTC trades in 2018. So there's big money in this stuff. They're trying to get into it. They are into it. Goldman Sachs is into it indirectly through its investment in Smaulgld. And finally, they say there's some movement now, these dormant Bitcoin whale wallets resuming activities. They don't know what it means. They think they could go up, it could go down. But that's another thing with these cryptocurrencies. Many of them, most of them, have high concentration of wealth or coins in individual users. All right, let's take a look at the comments, and then we're going to get into the discussion on gold and silver in deflationary. All right, let's see here what we got here. You guys are talking about the weather. All right, you guys are talking about ice fishing. GR Innovations, just stop, Lewis. There'll be no Bitcoin ETF. It's too unstable. GR Innovation, you're really on this. You listen to this one. He never stopped. You are really putting your reputation at risk, Lewis, trying to legitimize the Bitcoin crypto scam. First of all, I, myself, am not trying to legitimize Bitcoin. When Fidelity, when Microsoft, when Goldman Sachs, when all these large companies, Starbucks, New York Stock Exchange, and NASDAQ put money behind it, I report on it. They themselves are trying to legitimize what you call a Bitcoin crypto scam. I have no power to do that. I report on it. You have a very deranged view of what I do. All I do is report on. I myself do not try to legitimize any asset. I discuss the characteristics of them and the markets. The price keeps tanking because more people are waking up to it being a scam. Okay. Gold is far more stable, says JR Innovation. No 5% plunges like Bitcoin has. What's the point? Everyone knows that. They're two different assets. Litecoin is even more of a joke than Bitcoin. Well, that's possible. All right. Lewis, I would like to know the price you invested in Bitcoin and Litecoin. Well, there's a lot of things I'd like to know about you, but I don't have the nerve to ask, and I'm not going to. When did you buy in? What does this have to do with anything? I'm reporting on assets and the markets. You are obsessed with somehow that I am trying to legitimize Bitcoin and Litecoin merely by talking about them. If you're not, then you're no different than Brian Kelly on CNBC. Oh, I'm different from Brian Kelly in many respects. I'm not on CNBC. I don't get on every day and tell you that Bitcoin's going to the moon, Bitcoin's going to the moon, and showing you charts, and coming on pretty much every day during 2018 say it's going up and then go, oh, I was shorting it the whole time. Big, big difference. In any event, I would advise you, JR Innovations, if you don't like the reporting that I do, then don't watch it. But what you say about my reputation, it's more about yours. I think you look really foolish coming on here all the time and in the comments saying that I am trying to legitimize Bitcoin, and somehow my reporting on Bitcoin and Litecoin is going to harm my reputation. I don't think so. Maybe in your eyes, that's fine. I am not looking for your approval or approbation. All right. 1430. Scott loves that little story. All right. I'm just going to have to ignore JR Innovations from now on. It's too bad. All right. Let's see. Jewelry is the best use as MK Hernes. Catherine Austin Fitz on Greg Hunter today. They're planning on ending constitutional property rights. Scary. Listen, you know, I didn't listen to it, but I hear a lot of this stuff. They just go off. Yeah, how can they end constitutional property rights without an amendment? Asked Carl Joseph Watson. All right. Yeah, I will, Scott. I'll have a listen. I mean, Catherine Austin Fitz says some good stuff once in a while, but all right. Chrono Trigger fan says Bitcoin ETF. Just wait until Lewis launches the Mug ETF. Yes, indeed. I've been working with the SEC about getting a Mug ETF off the ground. Now, the question is, if you have a Mug ETF, are mugs then being properly hoarded? Because if you hoard a mug, what value does it have if it's not being used as a drinking vessel? All right, let's see. Andrew, LMAO, if you have haters, you're doing something right. Well, that's true. I mean, but you see, the thing is, what's interesting with JR Innovations, whatever innovations he's got there, I've explained this countless times, that I am not promoting Bitcoin or trying to legitimize it. I'm reporting on what is happening in the market. Now, there is an inference that it is being legitimized, and that's clear. When the SEC and the CFTC, well, in the CFTC's case, they actually have legitimized Bitcoin by allowing futures exchange. I didn't do that. I didn't say, oh, let's have Bitcoin on the COMEX. I didn't come up with that. I reported on that. If the SEC authorizes a Bitcoin ETF, it's not going to be because of me or any lobbying that I've done. All right. Let's see. Chrono Trigger fan. Someone's talking about biblicalisms? I missed that. Let's see. Did someone talk about the Bible? Not that we're going to talk about the Bible, but did someone mention that? No, I don't see that. All right. Let's see. Mugs are a real store of wealth, says Pablo. Yes, indeed. And you can store additional value directly in your mug, says Chrono Trigger fan. Yes. DB stupid. Don't be stupid, he says. Yeah, the line for new bills was 10 times longer than the new ACT line, right? Those video lines at the bank were crazy. Pablo says, agreed. I measure my wealth in mugs, or in my mugs. All right. Let's see. There is something Mario often says on Maneko 1. I know what that is. All right. It's no better than taking the advice of Webbot or a psychic. Oh, yes. I remember. I know what Chrono Trigger fan is referring to, is JR Innovation saying that Bitcoin was satanic, and like, okay. Yeah. And I guess by inference I am, because I'm trying to legitimize it by discussing it. All right, let's see. Yes, not this chat, Lewis, just some choice JR commentary from past streams. That's right, I forgot that one. He was saying it's some satanic stuff, mark of the beast. And I explained why Bitcoin is not mark of the beast, because if you read your Bible, the last book of the Bible, in Revelations, it talks about a chip in your hand or in your forehead, and you are not able to transact unless you have such chip or thing in your head. And since Bitcoin is voluntary, it is not thrust upon you officiously by legal tender laws by the government. It can't be. You could argue, if you are so inclined to make biblical revelations references, you could say that legal tender laws are the mark of the beast because you're forced to use the tender that's issued by the government. But no one is forcing you to use Bitcoin, and therefore you're not restricted from transacting. 666. There you go. All right. Let's see. Who's a tremendously entertaining cat? I don't know what you're talking about. All right, let's go on. All right. Carl Joseph DeMarco. There's a class of people who like to say just about everything new they don't understand is satanic. Yeah, that does happen. Disney is satanic too. That definitely happens. Ann Holloman, what's all the satanic stuff? I don't get how that enters it. A Chrono Trigger fan mentioned it, Ann. He mentioned it because JR Innovations mentioned on a prior stream that the problem with Bitcoin was that it was satanic. He didn't mention it tonight. Tonight he was mentioning that somehow my credibility is shot because I'm trying to, quote, legitimize Bitcoin and Litecoin, and the whole world now is now seeing it as a scam, and that's why the price is going down. And I merely pointed out that I myself am not trying to legitimize anything, that I'm pointing out of the billions of dollars that have come into the crypto space from Goldman Sachs, from Fidelity, from TD Ameritrade, from Microsoft, and the like. They are attempting to legitimize it. And I also mentioned that the SEC and the CFTC are also, quote, legitimizing Bitcoin. That is not a function of what I do. I don't come on and try to legitimize anything. I'm not promoting Bitcoin. I'm not promoting Litecoin. I'm not promoting gold or silver. If you go back to the Smaulgld matrix, I analyze their values. Now, you may disagree on how I added or came up with those values. But clearly, my point of view is that gold and silver are value in and of themselves, but not so valuable as currencies. And my view on Bitcoin and Litecoin is they have no value whatsoever intrinsically, but they have value as a medium of exchange, and that's what gives them value. That's not me legitimizing that. That is what I see happening. And the dollar, I'm not promoting the dollar, but when people say the dollar's days are numbered, I point out the value in the dollar is that everyone uses the dollar and that the dollar is the top medium of exchange. And if you don't like dollars, you can send them to me and I can find use for them. And I can actually buy valuable things with the dollars you send me. Now, if you don't get that my point of view is not to legitimize any particular asset, that the purpose of the channel is to analyze assets, the economy, and so on, then you're missing the point. Then you're stuck on something that you're creating your own straw man that you expect to knock down by saying, see, the price of Bitcoin went down, must mean it's a scam, and it must mean that Lewis doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm not predicting higher or lower prices for anything, other than silver. I did say silver would go higher this year, but that was based on a different analysis, not whether silver was a legitimate metal. All right, let's see, what else? He is one of the best mug salesmen I know. Who's that? Who could you be talking about? Emily York is here. Flurries in New Jersey today. All right, let's see. Oh, I missed a few. Okay. Watching NFL on mute with Smaulgld on blast. Use my mug today. I hope no one's home. You don't want to hear me yelling game over and game changer and chewing out people in the comments. All right. Mug power, says Pablo. Send me a picture. Andrew, Lewis, lots and lots of us understand your angle. That's why we buy your mugs and support you. Well, that's very kind of you, Andrew. And you know, it is a hard sell what I do, because there's many people that are into gold and silver or into cryptos. For starters, there's people that like silver and hate gold. We know who those people are. There's people who like cryptos and think that gold and silver are worthless. There are people who like gold and silver that think cryptos are evil, mark of the beast, and so on. And my point of view is, I'm trying to be as objective as possible. And what people don't want to hear is a criticism of the asset that they've fallen in love with. They don't want to hear anything negative about it. Gold is money, period. They don't want to hear that Bitcoin and Litecoin are not going to change the world the way they think it is. So when you become it's almost a cult. When you become so enamored with gold or silver or Bitcoin or Litecoin or any asset, then you lose any sense of perspective. I'm trying to maintain perspective. And if I say something positive about one asset, it doesn't mean I'm promoting it, trying to legitimize it. I also say negative things because everything in the world has its positives and its negatives, at least as far as assets go. I'm not talking about other things, but assets, there's no perfect asset. But people who buy gold think that that's the perfect asset. And the cut on that is, well, it doesn't have any income. So how could it be perfect? Bitcoin's not the perfect asset. It requires electronic inputs. It requires there to be a functioning blockchain, a functioning internet. It requires miners. How's that perfect? Well, it's decentralized. Yeah, but if that went away, it would be nothing. All right, let's see what else we got here. 3 feet of snow. Smaulgld's objective, that is why I'm here, says Ann Holloman. Well, thank you, Ann. Appreciate you being here. And Pablo is saying that the biggest attribute of Smaulgld, he's one of the best mug salesmen I know. That's right. Chrono Trigger fan, ouch. Andrew, we just missed the latest snowstorm in Michigan, but not by much. All right. Andrew grew up out there. Well, all right. DB stupid. I love that name because DB has told us that means don't be stupid. Will the Bitcoin ETF be required to disclose that they are holding Bitcoin in balance with investment in the fund? How will they handle the shorting of the ETF? You know, I don't know, and I haven't been, obviously, because I'm not promoting the Bitcoin ETF. I haven't really gone through all of the comments. When you do a registration statement with the SEC, a registration statement is all the material information that is required by law under the 34 Act, the Securities and Exchange Commission Act of 1934, that you have to give in a public document that meets the requirements of full disclosure. And the SEC reviews all of that. And as part of the process of getting your registration statement declared effective, remember, the SEC doesn't approve or disapprove of the offering. All they do is they review the document painstakingly for months sometimes until they feel that they've answered questions like the one you're just asking, and that not only have they received a proper answer, but that they reviewed the language in the document that explains all the mechanisms that an investor might need to know. What's interesting is most people who buy securities never read the registration statement, never read the prospectus, but the SEC makes you go through this rigmarole if you're going to bring your company to a public offering. Also, you can sue the company for a misstatement in the registration statement, even if you never read it. You can find out later, oh, they made a mistake in filing this thing? Well, I'm going to sue on the basis that there's a misrepresentation or an omission. Let's say they didn't include what you wanted to be in there, and it turned out in after the fact to be material, and you suffered a loss as a result of that, meaning you never would have invested in that had you known, and they didn't put it in there in the registration statement, then you can sue. So that's why they're taking their sweet time approving a Bitcoin ETF. It's not because they think it's a scam. They want to know all of the material information, and some of it they're not comfortable with. Now, that's not for the registration purpose. That's for giving them a rule that will allow them under the 40 Act to put in an ETF. So there's different rules between what can be an ETF and what can be a security that's issued pursuant to a registration statement and a prospective. Now, in this case, there's going to be both. And that's why it's taking them a long time to come up with it. All right. let's see. The lake effect you guys are talking about. Chrono Trigger fan. Lewis, how do you feel about the recent push towards marketing 24 karat gold in the West? Could it succeed, or is the market too inundated with gemstone worship? I think you're talking about that meme stuff. I don't know. I mean, jewelry. I did an offering on jewelry back in the 90s in England, and a lot of that costume jewelry stuff is all marketing. A lot of it was 10 karat. I can't remember the name of the company I was working with. But what they had done was they bought costume jewelry to what they call the high street, or what we call Main Street. High Street is the street in England where you go around and you buy. Every town in England has a high street. It's the street, the commercial commerce. And they had all these, I wouldn't say they were cheap, but they were accessible jewelry stores. So it wasn't like you went in and it was really expensive jewelry. It was jewelry that you can go in and it was almost buy off the shelf. But a lot of it was 10, 12 karat, and that was attractive. And I'm sure you're seeing that in India right now with Indians, middle class, buying silver jewelry because they can. They have a little extra money. It's a sign of a burgeoning middle class. People with disposable income can buy jewelry. Now, buying 24 karat jewelry, you're going to add a big expense onto that. And just because something is 24 karat doesn't mean that it is of the best quality. So, for example, Tiffany, Cartier, and the higher end jewelers won't necessarily work with 24 karat. The value in certain jewelry is its artistry, and it's harder to work with 24 karat gold. In fact, you don't do anything with 24 karat gold. You just put it in links, you put it in a ring, and that's about it, because it's too soft. So they like to mix and make alloys of gold, like they'll add copper to give it that reddish tinge. European countries like Sweden, well, they prefer that look. And that might be an 18 karat. Or if you're just making costume, you'll go down to 10, 12 karat. So I don't think that you're going to get a social, cultural trend towards 24 karat. You already have somewhat of that. Places like Thailand and India, where they'll prefer a high quality or high percentage or high karat, 22, 24 karat, because they know that it's an investment as well. But in America and in the West, to convince people that they should just buy wearable wealth, I don't see it taking off. But then again, we talked the other night how I didn't see how the iPod Shuffle would take off. Now we're far past my area of competence. Let's see. You guys are talking about snow. Chrono Trigger fan. Emily York, message retracted. Well, that's better than having your message dinged by the censor. I get that all the time. All right. You guys are having a meteorological discussion. DB stupid. Can they use fiat to crash the price of Bitcoin by selling Bitcoin in the ETF down to zero holdings while longs falsely think they're helping the price go long in the ETFs? DB stupid, you should be a market manipulator. Every asset is subject to manipulation, and there's no shortage of ways doing it. One of the things that the SEC is concerned about is what they're called market surveillance agreements. They will not stop a company from going public because it has risk. As long as the risks are adequately disclosed, they will allow a company to go public. They can say, this company sucks. They won't say that. They'll say, this company has never had any earnings, has no expectation of making earnings. I think Snapchat went public with that, and people bought it anyway. As long as you disclose it, they don't mind. Now, it's different with the ETF. The purpose of the ETF is they're trying to make sure that the markets for which the assets are trading under are subject to a type of transparency where the SEC can see through market surveillance sharing agreements that there's no issue. Meaning, if it is, and that's why BACT is important for Bitcoin, because it's going to be run by ICE, which is not the immigration, but is Intercontinental Exchange, which owns New York Stock Exchange, and then NASDAQ will also have a exchange set up with Fidelity and ErisX. These are companies that are skilled at market surveillance, and they will work with the SEC and have an agreement to say, here's what we're seeing in the market, so that the SEC can have the same look that the market operator has. That gives the SEC an element of comfort. Not that manipulation doesn't take place, or not that manipulation can't take place, but that if it does take place, they'll be able to see it. Whereas one of the reasons they put down the first ETF applications by the Winklevoss twins was that 80% at the time in 2016 of the trading of Bitcoin happened on non-regulated exchanges, and those exchanges were located in China. So good luck figuring out whether anything's being manipulated on a Chinese exchange. Now, with the exchanges being brought in, it's not that those exchanges don't exist anymore, which is interesting, but it's not that all the trading is now going to happen in the United States. But what the ETF promoters are trying to say is that we're going to allow you to look at the trading on these exchanges, which they'll have more comfort in. That's what Van Eck, Gabor Govindon, whatever his name is, has been pushing for the Van Eck ETF. That's what the Winklevoss twins are trying to say, that they're running an exchange, Gemini, that this exchange is up to speed. They also have the proper institutional strength storage for the Bitcoin. So that's where they're headed, and they're trying to satisfy the head of the SEC as well as the commission group that's working on this. And they already have, I think they have 2 votes out of 5, and they may get all of the vote. They may get 3 of the votes, and then you'll get a Bitcoin ETF. Not because I'm legitimizing it, but because the SEC is looking at it, and statements from the SEC have said they want to give investors the ability to invest in cryptocurrencies. They also have said publicly, and there's a website called sec.gov/ICO, they want companies to bring their cryptocurrencies to market in the same way that companies bring IPOs to market. So you're going to see tokens coming to market. Again, not because I'm trying to legitimize it, because this is the official policy of the current Securities and Exchange Commission. All right, what else do we got? Emily York, I love the silver kookaburra. Yes, those birds are nice. I have the whole collection since 1990. Wow. I have the America the Beautiful too, but when you sell silver, the best deal is eagles. Yes, you get the biggest premium. Almost any other silver, you might not even get spot. But remember, when you buy eagles, you pay a premium well over $2 unless you're buying backdated eagles. So the way that works is the authorized purchasers have to pay $2 per coin to the U.S. Mint, and there's about 12 of them. Only one of them is a retail seller, that's Atmex. They then sell the coins that they buy from the U.S. Mint directly with the $2 premium per coin, no matter what the price of silver is. I've done a chart on this. So if the price of silver is $20, they pay $22 for the Silver Eagle coin per coin. If the price is $40, they pay $42, $50, $52. Which means that the percentage premium you're paying, the lower the price of the coin, makes the Silver Eagle actually less attractive. Although when you go to sell it, you might get $1 over spot, $1.50 over spot. That's why you're able to find online sometimes, or at a coin shop, American Silver Eagles trading for less than the $2 authorized purchaser price, because they've repurchased old backdated Silver Eagles from other people and only paid them 50 cents to $1 over spot, and now they're able to sell them to you for $1.50 to $2 over spot. So the Silver Eagle is the deepest market. They've sold about 650 million of them since 1986, so there are a lot of them out there. And it's a nice looking coin. It looks like the Liberty standing $half on the front, and on the back they've got the heraldic eagle, but never changes. The kookaburras always change every year. It's not just the same bird. And they change the Queen's portrait every 8 or 9 years as well on the back. I like the koalas though. All right, let's see. Not a fan of the privy marks, but Some people like those. I don't think you can even see them. But wait a minute. What's going on here? This girl looking at you, looking at the wrong picture. The picture you should be looking at is our classic and super classic mugs. There you go. All right. Ann Holloman, all the schools close and food disappears in the grocery store. Yeah, if you live in the South, you can't handle a little snow. I have Eagles, Emily, and keep a gold coin in my wallet. Well, that's nice. DB stupid. I can't see how an ETF could function with a different strike price than the actual Bitcoin. The ETF seems very sketchy. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of mechanics there that they have to work out. They've said for the public, the big issues are storage, market surveillance, manipulation. But I'm sure they have other issues, and each of them are all structured differently as well. $24 karat gold. Okay, let's see. Chrono Trigger fan. I find it interesting that guys like Trace Mayer are pushing back as it's a direct competitor, Lightning, which Trace also pimps frequently. Okay, what Chrono Trigger fan is talking about is Lightning is... I know why he's doing it. This is what we talked about at the beginning. The idea of institutionalizing cryptocurrency is antithetical of what cryptocurrency is supposed to be, or Bitcoin specifically. If it's supposed to be a peer-to-peer exchange, you're not supposed to have it in through financial intermediaries like Wall Street. It's not supposed to be stored by a Wall Street custodian. It's not supposed to be traded via a security with an ETF with a symbol through a Fidelity account when you're supposed to just trade the actual Bitcoin itself. Okay. Now, the reason someone like Trace or anybody who's a holder of Bitcoin would like something like Backed, which would include a... Backed is not an ETF. Let's go into what Backed is. Backed is a consortium consisting of the Boston Consulting Group, Microsoft, Starbucks, and what they're trying to do is, and the New York Stock Exchange, is to put together a platform where people can trade futures that are physically delivered so that people would have confidence and they're not just trading the price, that they can actually receive the Bitcoin at the end of the transaction. And then the organization would also work towards, once you have that Bitcoin, being able to, rather than just put it into a bank account, you can actually hold on to it yourself and then go spend it at Starbucks. Now, the reason anyone who holds Bitcoin would like that is that would mean institutional money coming into the space, and it would also mean the holy grail for a lot of Bitcoiners is widespread adoption. Well, if you have people buying their merchandise or making it easier to convert your Bitcoin into some type of fiat so you can buy it at Starbucks, well, there's your widespread adoption. Now, as a direct competitor to Lightning, Lightning is, in some respect, it's actually adding another layer onto Bitcoin that maybe Bitcoin maximalists don't like, but what Lightning does is allows people to transact and gets rid of that, quote, cumbersome and slow process where every transaction has to be put in blocks and then it has to be recorded on the blockchain. In Lightning, you make the transaction and then it gets recorded on the blockchain, but meanwhile your transaction has already happened. Both of those are consistent and not necessarily mutually exclusive, because what they're both trying to do is create value for the Bitcoin ecosystem by making them both available as a medium of exchange and a convenient medium of exchange. One for institutional investors, Backed and ETFs, futures, and then for consumers, Lightning. All right, let's see. Chrono Trigger fan would love to hear what our buddy Ann Ref has to say about it all. We'll have him on again. He works at a slow pace, a very methodic pace. He generally does 1 to 3 blog posts a year, and I try to have him on as soon as he's completed a blog post so that it's in his still fresh in his mind. So I will have a word with him and get his views on that. Doesn't tarnish, amazing for electronics, which is the reason they want it. Andrew, well, that's silver. That is correct. But you know, gold doesn't tarnish. That's right. Silver does tarnish. Competitors Chrono Trigger fan says competitors and that they're both off-chain settlement platforms for crypto. Right. Right, but isn't the more the merrier what a Bitcoin holder would want? Because the more adoption and the more use and the more investors. In other words, if you can have 2 income streams instead of 1 income stream, would you say, and let me give you, okay, I can own stock in a oil company and I can own stock in a solar company. I hope they both do well, even though they might both be working at cross purposes. So that's, I guess, how you would explain that. Emily York, your friend Wall Street from Main Street had a good yesterday. Hope it was a good something. I have no kooks. I want one. My favorite Athenian owl, says Andrew. Bought a tube of owls as soon as I could. All right, let's see. Andrew. All right. Carl Joseph DeMarco. Okay, gang, the dinner bells are ringing. Y'all have a good night. Success in your investments and fun in the snow. Thank you, Carl. All right. Carl's written a book. You guys should check it out. I did an interview with Carl. Remember, anyone who's on this stream, even JR Innovations, you're welcome to come on the show. I do a series called Smaulgld Subscribers Sound Off. Chrono Trigger fan has been on. Ann Renf has been on. Carl Joseph DeMarco has been on. Send me an email. I haven't done them in a while, but I will do them. And it's basically your show. You get about 45 minutes to talk about whatever you want. Okay, let's see. There will be a time when people accept crypto and not care which coin. Oracles will automatically switch your coin on the fly, says Andrew. Well, there was this 10x and a few other of these coins that were supposed to be doing something like that, where you would store your cryptos, and they could be any number of them, not just 1 or 2 of them, and then you'd use it as a Visa card, and the merchant wouldn't know what you were doing. They would just be receiving the fiat through the processed transaction. All right, let's see. Chrono Trigger fan, I guess it depends on the Bitcoin holder in question. Back doubtlessly brings more institutional money to the table, but it's not a core protocol the way Lightning is. No, and doesn't say that it is. You know, when you have $125 billion worth of value and it's separated, you're going to have a different, it's not like one person owns 125 billion and decides where it's going to go. What you're seeing, I think, in the Bitcoin space are people having different views on how they can make money on it. And there's not one monolithic view on what the direction of Bitcoin can go. And that's why you had the whole Bitcoin fork thing with Roger Ver and the big blocks, small blocks with Bitcoin Cash. All right. And I think that about does it for the evening. I want to thank everyone for joining me this evening. And we will see you again tomorrow night. And stay warm and out of the snow. Good night. Oh, I didn't see how many I missed so many comments. All right, well, I'll pick them up next time. That can't be right. Did it really start him out at 5? No. They suck when they do that.